That's not unusual.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Sorry. Roll call, Chris.
Brad Eady,
Yep.
Bob Sullivan,
Yes.
Mike Hancock,
Yes.
Di Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Alex Shada,
Yes.
Renee Philmeyer, yes.
Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's a copy of the Nebraska Weeds Act on the wall. Feel free to review. Approval of the agenda. Anything needs to be changed? If not, any discussion? Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
Any further discussion? Chris?
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee, Brad,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Part 3.1, our annual public hearing regarding the budget. We have to open the hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing regarding the budget? So moved.
second.
Any discussion? Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee, yes. Brad,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Brad?
Okay, so you guys have got a ton of information the last couple of weeks as the budget has come together, once we've got valuation and all that stuff kind of put together and formalized. What you see on the budget notice, there's 3 columns. There's an actual column, there's an actual column, an actual estimated column, and a budgeted column. That third column, budgeted, is not the same as columns 1 or 2 when you talk about actual expenditures or your actual estimated. When budgets are put together, the requirement is that we show every dollar out of every fund being expended. When in reality, a lot of those funds, we don't anticipate expending every dollar because we need some carryover cash, because we need some cash to operate. When you talk the general fund, those tax asking funds, there's got to be operating money in that because it essentially comes in 3 times per year. So we've got to carry that across 4 months. We try to carry a balance in there somewhere between 3 and 6 months expenses. We've done a pretty good job of that in the past. As we've gone along the last couple of years, we dipped into reserves a little bit in order to keep that levy down for taxpayers. In reality, when you look at comparisons to the budget, valuation's up 9.61% this year. The total budget, so as you guys are looking at it, column 3, that bottom line, that number is down about 7%, about 2.2 million from last year. Total tax asking is down about 2%. Total levy, if this were to go forward, is up just over 11 cents. Again, highlights that I have, there's a significant difference between that budgeted column, that column 3, and your AFR column 1. I think it's fair to compare AFR to AFR year to year, or budget to budget year to year, but comparing across becomes a little bit difficult, especially when you have some carryover money. Building fund, the reason we want to maintain that building fund is we're paying off the project. It is put together as a 30-year term, but what we discussed as a committee and a board with the help of D.A. Davidson was we would have the opportunity to pay that off early, assuming that we stayed with it, and at the end of every 7-year cycle, we'd have a chance to put in a lump sum to bring that down even further. So the goal would be to try to get there in 20 years as opposed to 30 years. If it's less than that, even better, because then it's off the books. Probably the last piece in there that might raise some eyes is depreciation fund. We are always in need of depreciation fund. Depreciation fund can be used for anything that's of depreciable value. We've used it for vehicles, we've used it for roofs, we've used it for curriculum, we've used it for technology. Another big one that's going to come up that we're going to have to address sooner rather than later is the track and football field. Probably 6 years, I wish Rob was here, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, put a Band-Aid on that track, trying to limp through another cycle. That Band-Aid held out as long as it could. The fact is the underlayment, the asphalt base is what's crumbling, and it doesn't matter what you put on top of it, it's falling apart. That could be used for depreciation. There's a lot of directions to go, but I don't think any of them are want type asks, they are absolutely need type asks. That's a brief overview. Any questions, any clarifying pieces? I know I've met with a few of you, I've talked with a few of you. Make sure we get everything taken care of. The one other piece to this is the way that this budget is put together, it also includes the additional percentage that's allowable under statute, which comes up in a resolution later in the meeting.
Brandon, when does that track need to be replaced? I trust that you have a plan or a timeline for that.
As soon as possible. It probably needed to replace last year in reality.
So are you bringing a proposal to the board? So, I mean, when should we expect to see that?
I absolutely can, but I'm not going to do it unilaterally without the board saying, yes, okay, this is something we would definitely need to consider.
The other thing that I think is probably worthwhile would be a 5-year capital replacement plan, so we can see, okay, this year we're planning for curriculum because that aligns with state standards. Get us on a rotation for vehicle replacement, all of those things. It seems like we could do better planning if we had, a 5-year plan. Show us what that looks like. Get the track on there. Get anything else we need to do on there. Obviously, not locked in, and you don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
But I think for planning purposes, in my mind, that's pretty important for the board to be thinking about as we look at these budgets.
Sure. That can be done.
Back to the track.
Yeah.
8 years ago, we had a company come out, I think Jeff Simons represented them, cost us 80 grand. I think it was, about 80,000, wasn't it?
A little over.
To put a Band-Aid on. My biggest fear is if you don't do something, I would agree with Brandon, the track is not a want, it's a need. We're gonna shut the track down. It's a liability. Somebody's gonna get hurt, because like I said, Collins came out how many years ago and said that foundation was shot thin. They said we could probably get by if we do these things. We ain't getting by anymore. To me, it's definitely something that, and I think Brandon, you and I talked about it. It's something that needs to get addressed now, and needs to get at least have an idea what's going to cost.
In the company that came out, the dollars we spent up front was to basically provide a warranty. They would do everything they could to put a Band-Aid over it as long as they could. And from what you're saying, or he was out fairly recently.
Yeah, so essentially it's a 7-year plan to hold that thing together. It's a different type of technology that they use, but essentially it's only addressing the top coat. There's nothing they can do with that asphalt base.
I was just walking by there that you can see between the asphalt and the track. You can see. I guarantee there's rodents right underneath there. Things are wrong. Yeah, that's why. Makes sense of planning for it. Yeah, I think we agree. 5-year budget would be great.
Yeah, I mean, if that's unsafe, absolutely bring it to the board sooner rather than later. We don't want anybody getting hurt on the track, and if that's the condition it's in. I guess, help me understand, so on this proposed budget, what does that $2.1 million in the depreciation fund represent? That's what you're asking for?
No, so that would be the balance at the end of next year if nothing is, how do I say this? If nothing were spent from the time that this school year began, we made the transfer expected at the end of next year, that's the balance that we think that it would be.
And what do we think the track is going to cost? When was the last time we got actual pricing?
Within the last 5 years, I feel like I have fairly accurate numbers. Just the track itself is less than $1 million. I feel pretty confident saying that. But I think the other piece of it is, and again, I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm not saying turf, grass, anything else. I'm just saying the football field in general needs attention. And if you're going to do the track, you should do it at the same time because of the heavy equipment that's involved in that. I'll leave it there. I think it should probably be a combo consideration.
If you think about it, let's just do some history here with the football field, Red 908. Before we made it our game field in '95, it still was a practice field. And we really never, I mean, you think about since the school was built, I mean, you go back, look, I don't think we've ever done anything to that field. Ever. So if you go to a game today, and you go to another field, say any other field that's, they have a nice kind of ground. We have a kind of a, like this, doesn't drain right. But as I think I said, I don't think it's always something we need to ask the taxpayers to do if we want to do something with the football field. It's something we can maybe do a capital improvement privately, fundraising, if we want to do more than just recrown and put grass. But I think he's right, though. It's going to have to get addressed. At some point, in the best time to do something like that would be when you do the trash.
I just speaking from being in different high school football venues, ours is, I don't think this is an exaggeration, a laughing stock of teams that we play regularly. I mean, you go out there right now, and we're 4 games in, there's hardly any grass on half the field. It's just, it gets a ton of use from, not just sports, I mean, band,
Everything.
youth sports, community, it's great, but it's just, it's becoming dangerous too, that whole area right now. Kids slipping, falling, then you water it, you slip even more.
And isn't that, I guess, why haven't we been doing anything? Why aren't we putting more grass on, seeding it in the, I mean,
No, we are. They don't have any place to march and park it on blacktop at the middle school.
So you're not allowing it to grow.
And we have it through the practice field.
Yeah, so
It's taking twice the work, it's taking twice the activity that we do.
so we're in a tough spot just because of the construction project right now. So obviously that's temporary, but, yeah, I think we gotta get pricing.
Other questions regarding the budget? Committee board members?
So Brandon, I also
Yeah.
want to explain on column 2, because this is something that I think I was struggling with it too until I really put 2 and 2 together on the special building, how that works when you do an expected versus the new budget, where it gets carried.
Right, so what you see in column 2 is what is estimated actual expenditure from the 22-23 budget. That's not everything that was in that account to start the year. So there's a portion of that that carries forward. I'm guessing roughly $5 million that would carry forward, and then you would add the tax asking on top of it, which is where you come up with that number for the special building fund.
So when we look at that budget, if I get it right, you can subtract the amount that gets carried over to the bottom line, and that'd be more of a accurate to what between last year and this year, without obviously not finalized.
Yeah, it'd be much closer.
Well, if you would take that number that he carried over to the 23-24 and subtract it from the total, the 29 million, you'll probably get more of a truer comparison from last year's budget to this year's budget. Because you're showing 7 million, but we got to remember that special building gets pulled over to the next year.
Remind me what the year actually is. What is the exact time frame?
It is September 1 to August 31, 23, 24. That's the school fiscal year.
And Brandon, do are our 22-23 numbers solid?
22-23 are, I'm gonna say 90 to 95% solid. 21-22 are absolute.
Are there any comments from the?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So of the 2.1 million, you were talking about 2.1 million in the depreciation fund is what you expect to have in there at the end of the next fiscal year?
If nothing were to be spent out of there, that's potentially what it can be at.
Okay.
But that's also accounting for a transfer going into it as well,
From what?
from general fund.
This budget year. So we start out by putting 2.1 million roughly in there.
No. I wait until the end of the year to see where we're at in the general fund before I ever talk about any sort of transfers.
So how much is in the depreciation fund as of today?
Do you remember what that is on the agenda? Give me just a minute. Unless Chris pulls it up first.
$888,000.
And that's not accounting for a transfer still being made on the 22-23 budget.
And that would bring it up to the 2.1, or you're going to do that next August?
No, there would be one now before the audit. There would be another one next year at the end of the budget year as well. So it's accounting for 2 transfers still.
Brandon, how much flexibility do you have to move money between funds? For example, between general fund and depreciation fund?
How much flexibility do I have?
Well, the board, obviously.
You have, not from a taxable fund to a non-taxable fund, you have fairly free reign. You cannot move between taxable funds without repaying them.
Give me an example. What does that mean?
You couldn't move from general fund to special building fund or general fund to bond fund without repaying that because those are specific taxable items. You could transfer from general fund into activities, depreciation, school nutrition, employee benefit. You can do those however you want, however you see fit.
And so you could move money into depreciation fund for 22-23, and then if it turned out you didn't have the 4-month cushion in the general fund you needed, you could pull money back. I mean, can you move money like that?
I've not had that situation yet. I can't answer that for certain. I'd want to talk to the auditors to make sure that we had it ironed out.
So on the document that you sent me, I think today on the Board of Education, we had budgeted 24 roughly in 21, 22. That went up to 34, 22, 23. Now it's at 35 is the projected, correct? So what is the Board of Education spend to the tune of 35,000 next budget? On what?
Bob, can you tell us what you're referring to? I'm not sure I
This
see
is
that.
the, whatever that's called.
Oh, those are the budget worksheets.
Okay.
If you give me just a second, I'm going to pull up another sheet here.
You mean now the board code?
Yeah.
Is that for fees for
That's
the
for-
pension?
Yeah, there's,
Any
well,
associations?
and it's also, HSA fees go in there, I'm trying to think what else we cover.
That's fair.
Insurance goes in there.
For health savings account? For us?
The HSA that we pay, like $2 per person that has an HSA, because we have to pay a fee, like 7 days, we pay the fee.
Right, specific line items that are in there include Professional services, liability insurance, advertising, printing, travel mileage, supplies, dues and fees.
What's the biggest budget item?
Dues and fees, probably.
What's that?
This past year, it was about 21,000, 22,000, somewhere in there.
Who do we pay that to?
That would be NASB, that would be, is
Our-
NCSA in there?
Yeah, and then our biggest fee is, because of NCSA, plus we also pay for our meetings. That we have to pay for the form part, that's in
The technology.
the technology part, which I don't think was. We don't generally use that. Legal fees is a whole different.
Yeah,
Is that-
it used to be under there, but now it's in it.
That's all okay.
It's 23, 30, I think.
And so that's the district legal services? Yeah.
Correct.
So that went from 27 to 71, and now we're projecting it at 75?
Correct.
Is that right? So what's the cause for that extensive increase?
I would be happy to discuss with you later,
Okay.
just for protection of individuals.
Well, I think what I'd probably like to see before I make a decision on the budget is kind of what you're talking about, the stuff behind it. I think essentially I'll kind of link today for looking for all the different.
I can reach something that shows exactly what comes out of there each year, each month.
And then, like I said, Brandon explained to me, when it comes to activities, that's just a number he throws in there. That's not an actual, as you said, is, it doesn't count against us. It's not, because it's not, it doesn't come out of the three that we have to.
Right, it's not taxable,
Not tax, yeah.
but the biggest thing is putting a number there that we're not going to have to amend the budget with.
And I know you said you were gonna look up those fees for me, what we took in last year. We talked about what we took in from gate fees, all
Yep.
that throughout the year.
Yep.
Because I just said, like I said, it seemed like that number's big, but obviously it's just a guesstimate number. But just look at 2 years ago, the actual was 524. This year, you're probably gonna be close to that, and that seems like it's another big jump. And I just was curious to see what additional amount would that be? Why is it another 200,000?
Back to the depreciation, so the money that you're likely going to put into the depreciation fund over the course of the next 12 months just comes from the general fund because it's money that we didn't use on other things during the budget year.
Correct.
I think included in that 5-year plan to label out technology purchases, transportation costs, whatever else would be on that schedule.
Yep.
The increase, I mean, from 461 and 122,000 to 2.1 million, is the increase because of the additional state aid based on recognition?
No, in depreciation, it's a result of carryover balances. So what you see in column 1 and 2 are straight expenditure with no concept of any balance within that account. It becomes bigger because you have a starting balance and then you're making transfer into there.
But we're looking at about 1.2 million in the next 12 months into that fund because there's about 800,000.
Potentially in the neighborhood, yeah.
What was the deposits into that fund in years past, last year?
It ranges and is completely dependent on tax asking, budget, and what's there at the end of the year. It's been as little as nothing historically, and it's been as big as probably 500,000 or 600,000.
Brandon, can you repeat what you said you're proposing with respect to the levy?
As far as
Reducing that, are you Is that an 11% reduction or
Correct.
increase?
No, the levy would go down 11 cents, and the total tax asking compared to last year would be down 2 or 3%.
But this budget proposes to use the additional 6, right? That has to have supermajority approval.
The resolution to approve the 6 requires supermajority. Something to point out on that, I think, is when you talk about just the budget itself, when you look at salaries and benefits, wages and benefits across the board with staff, the wage and benefits that were agreed to last year for this upcoming year make up about 80% of the budget. If you take that increase and apply it across 80%, we're still increasing more than 3% of that allowable growth by statute without any sort of resolution or anything else. So just to make it work, we're still going to have to approve something, even if it's not the 6% that's in the budget right now. I'm guessing we're going to need maybe close to half of it at an absolute minimum.
To cover staff cost increases.
Yeah.
So you're thinking of 6. So obviously when we talk about the 6, what we're really talking about is 9,
Right.
correct?
There's 3 built in, and then you have a 6 outside of it.
Okay. And so just to cover the cost increases related to staff, how much of that extra 6 do you think we need? Have you run those projections?
I have, it's 2 to 3%, probably at a minimum. I think to cover staffing and those increased costs in our fixed electrical, water, all that business, just operating.
And so just to clarify from last month, what I thought I heard was we can break apart that 6% supermajority
Yep.
and authorize accessing that when we need it without necessarily approve it being in the budget. Right, so those are 2 different votes,
Correct.
if I understood you correctly.
They're 2 different votes. They'll both have to have decisions made before the budget's turned in, because what we can't do is we can't say, okay, we're going to access 3% up front, even though we allow the 6%, we're going to access an additional 3% up front, and then if we need it later, we'll take another 3. Once your tax asking is set with the county, that's where it is.
So as a practical matter, here's the piece that I don't understand under the new legislation.
Yep.
So if we authorize access to the additional 6%, but do not authorize a budget with the additional full 6%, what is the effect of having approved access?
Not 100% clear yet. Depending on who you talk at the State Department of Education, it sounds like whether you access it or not, it is considered your baseline for next year. Though it's not explicitly written that way, that's the assumption that's being made. Again, it's not clear, however. So the additional 6% would change that baseline. Like the baseline we operate of this year, 3% of that baseline. Next year, what their assumption is if you grant access, that would move that baseline to whatever access you granted, not what you actually accessed.
And who's going to make that determination? I guess when are we going to know the answer to that question?
Probably in February or March when the unicameral gets back to it.
That's pretty poor timing
Yeah.
and not helpful. So even with this 9%, I just want to make sure I've got all of these kind of dominoes lined up here. This budget represents a 9% increase, right? So the 3%, that doesn't require any supermajority vote, plus the 6%. That full 9 is represented in the budget that is before the board today.
Accurate.
Okay. And then but even with that additional 9%. We still are in a position to lower the levy by 11 cents.
Lower the levy by 11 cents and lower the tax asking by $250,000 to $300,000 compared to last year.
And included in that is the 1.7 from the state is included in this budget.
Correct. Which is why we can lower the levy and why we're taking less taxes than the previous year.
My struggle is not with anything other than with the state. Because this not having a final budget and to approve another budget, my brain just doesn't work that way. You know, your end of the year is up. Look, see where you're at, and you look, okay, now let's make the budget for the new year. Well, as you just said before, the auditors will finalize it, when you say October, November?
Yeah, it's due the first week.
Okay, so think about that. So we're already going to approve a budget for next year, and we haven't closed out the year before. And you have a break from, as we talked, you said you have a really good feeling that number, that 22, we're going to be there, maybe a little under. So that's good to know, but it'd be nice to know what it was.
The other thing that makes this so hard when you look at, I thought the variation in state aid,
That was
high to low, there's a variation of $1.595 million. Wow. 1.6 million plus or minus. That's hard to plan for. And do each of these changes correspond with legislative changes?
Each of these changes.
So like 2012, 1.66 million. 2013, 1.1 million. 2014, 911. Then it goes down to 340, 198, 239. Is legislative changes each year that allow them to use or calculate the formula differently? What is going
Yes,
on
but
here?
no. So the first thing that they calculate is needs-based formula. It's going to be, the very first calculation is based on evaluation. Compared to the needs that you have in your budget, that's a whole formula based on history. So they calculate what needs you have, compare that to a flat levy that is ranged between 95 and $1.05 just for calculation purposes to see, can you meet your needs with just your valuation, putting a ton of pressure on property taxes. It's not the school districts or the municipalities that do that, that comes from Lincoln. But then what happens, and this becomes an argument point between the body and those entities outside that are subject to state aid, is on a yearly basis, there is a calculation for what state aid is supposed to be across the state and for the schools. And then when you get to the legislature, they're going to take the number that they have set aside, not necessarily the number that it's supposed to be on the calculation, but the number that they set aside, prorated. So you have them saying, yes, we fully funded TIOSA state aid because we put all the money that we accounted for in there. On the other side, you've got school districts that will say, no, you didn't fully fund state aid because these are the numbers it's supposed to be. Does that make sense?
And by supposed to be, are you talking about a formula that's written into law?
Correct.
How do they get away with not fully funding that if that formula is prescribed by law?
Because they don't have, the way that they, this is my understanding, the way they present it is they don't have the funds available, so they will prorate it back based on what everybody is supposed to get relative to each other.
So help us swing the
Which is why you'll notice as valuation spiked around, 2010, 12, somewhere in there, we went from 1.6 million in state aid and just fell off a cliff in about 3 years.
Yeah.
So, when you do the math on this, 1.7 accounts for 0.13 if you would think about the levy.
Based on today's
Which
valuation.
today's valuation, 0.13. So what happens next year is just throw out the devil's advocate, we get half of that. How are we making that up next year? Other than raising the levy back up?
If there are reserves that exist,
Okay,
we can cut into those some to pacify for a short period of time, but you raise your levy if state aid doesn't come through.
It's just a crazy push-pull between state and local.
Did we raise our levy consistently over the past 12, 13 years?
We dropped our levy every year that I've been here.
So we aren't really dependent on state aid like some of the school districts are.
No, we're what's considered non-equalized. We still get state aid, but most of our state aid, I believe, is income tax rebate. The old formula allowed for option enrollment. You get an amount per student. Schools like North Bend, Cedar Bluffs got windfalls from the state as part of their state aid package, but it's not TIOSA, which is that equalized versus unequalized.
And with this new formula, have they done away with that option?
They've done away with a lot of those pieces because now it's a foundation aid based on per student amount that's paid to each school, but that is set to reduce, if I'm not mistaken. So this year it's in full, but in 2 or 3 years, I think it's set to reduce by, I don't say that out loud, because I'll be wrong, 30% maybe. So that piece will be less state aid with foundation.
One of the slights against TIOSA over the years is that nobody really knew how it worked.
TIOSA was very complicated, and it ended up that a ton of money was going to metro areas just because they don't have the valuation accessible.
Right. And in Hastings, it was that way. I mean, we had no valuation, no growth, and so whole of a donut.
Correct.
And so we were very dependent on state aid out there, and then we come into this district where we hardly depend on it for anything. And so it's different. Same, kids getting educated in different ways.
Correct.
Yep.
At this time, we'll open public comment in reference to the public hearing regarding the budget. Anybody have comments? Going once? No, sir? Okay, close public comment. What else?
do you motion to close the public hearing? Yep. Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion. Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Item 3.2, we have a motion to open the public hearing regarding the tax request. Second. Chris?
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
Okay, not a ton to add here. General fund levy is decreased by 11 cents. That's where we see that savings in levy. The building fund levy stayed flat. Qualified cap, being such a small amount, stayed relatively flat. That's how we end up at minus 11 on that levy with a slight decrease in the tax asking. I hit most of my high points with the budget conversation, but if there's other pieces anybody needs, do my best right now.
Yeah, just Brandon, let's go back on the line for contingency. You and I talked about that. I think on the 125,000 that gets carried over on that budget for retirees.
Oh, back on the budget?
Yeah, I
Yep.
just.
Employee benefit.
Yeah, so for anyone that takes early retirement, that
So,
money.
yeah, we have a temporary early retirement incentive plan within the district where it can be enacted by the board at any time they so choose, and teachers can take it. if they are eligible, there's certain criteria, 20 consecutive years in the district, meet the rule of 85, so on and so forth. So that fund has a balance and there's a payout, the incentive to have a teacher retire and bring in a less expensive teacher to replace them to save the district some money. That's been done in the past. You'll see that it has a balance in the third column, no balance in columns 1 and 2. We haven't paid anything out in the last 2 years. That's just a balance that was sitting in there that we'll utilize if we ever offer that again.
Does that balance stay the same? You don't put more in?
There's no transfers going in. It can pick up interest and some of those things, but
You're not throwing more money?
we're not actively doing anything with that.
If a staff member were to utilize it, then it has to be backfilled, we have to throw money back into it.
Correct.
Then you then put that in your next year's budget, or?
Correct.
Okay.
So we plan ahead. The way that it works is, I think the board acts on it in February if the plan is offered, acts on any early retirements because they have to submit a letter of resignation at that time. And so Chris and I can calculate, okay, we know these people are going to be on this plan for 2 years, so we've got to put this money in so we can fund that. So we have time.
Can it be used for anything other than that?
If it can, we don't use it.
When was the last time you used it?
I think it was 3.
We'll have teachers retired, but they don't always qualify for this plan.
And the clarification, yeah, it's not a guarantee, it's something that is temporary and offered on an irregular basis.
Other questions for Brad? Tax request? At this time, we'll open public comment for the public hearing regarding tax request section of public comment. Anyone? Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing regarding the tax request? Second. Chris?
Alex,
Yes.
Renee? Yes. Brett?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Di?
Yes.
Board minutes from last month, any amendments, changes? And do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve board minutes as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Chris?
Mike?
Yes.
Di?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Renee? Yes. Brett?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
5 claims. Any non-service claim there today? Is there a motion to approve claims minus the non-service?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Any claims?
The bus van repairs, are those being made on vehicles that are in line to be replaced?
They're being made on vehicles just to keep them on the road. Some of, I would say majority of them are on vehicles that we plan on keeping at least the next 2 or 3 years. So they're necessary. It's not a Band-Aid just to get us through.
And some of that cost is that they have to do maintenance on every vehicle, and that runs us like, it's $100 or $200 a vehicle, just to do that.
Remind me, how many vehicles do we have roughly?
Roughly 20-ish at least, between buses and passenger vehicles.
There was a claim to Ralston Public School for summer services. I think we've talked about this in here before. Was that just to provide transportation and educational services?
That's educate,
No,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
for a
isn't it?
student, yeah,
That's hearing impaired.
As per any policies we enacted, I did look over the claims on Friday. It's not a set schedule. I talked to everybody. Everybody's good. If you need to, if something comes up and you need to shift a month to somebody else, it's not a set schedule. Chris has a folder in her office. PBH, there's a section on special ed. They're in order, they're nice and easy to go through. So,
I always bring it to the meeting too, so if there's anything you want to look at.
Friday, Monday, whatever works for you, just let Chris know.
And you'll be sending that reminder out for each month of it.
But we'll get a list,
Write
right?
it down.
Okay. I can't remember.
I can't.
Any discussion on claims?
And then you're gonna backfill anyone who forgets their one.
Correct. Disclaimer of that.
Don't pay no claims in.
Any other questions? Do it all with the heat,
Yeah,
We've got your motions.
Chris?
ready? Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee. Yes. Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
There's the law service claim.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Abstain.
Bob,
Yes.
Section 6, informational items, treasurer's report.
Nope, you're good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Treasurer's report, any questions on any of those said funds or balances? 6.2, policy review. And administrative reports are all attached. Scrolling down. Any questions on any of those reports?
I do have a question. Quite some time ago, we approved a metal detecting pole. Do we utilize that often? Daily? Monthly?
Not daily.
It's available and.
It's available and used, yes.
And when you, like, standing at the front entrance as kids are coming in, or just as necessary?
As needed and why are we on what'd you do, man?
Defensive driving class. That's Mr. Shade's class right there.
So anyway, it's as needed and as reasonable when there's reason to use it. I know at least in the middle school, high school, that's when it gets used.
Anything else on that note? Brandon?
Yep,
Breakdown report.
you bet. So I've got, Josh, will you take this, please? Got just a few things to talk about here. The first, SR2, we've been billed and are going to pay the contracted amount for the elementary chiller project. Again, those timelines have shifted. While we have until December of this calendar year to request the funds, we have to expend those funds by the end of September. So I had MCL bill us for the already contracted amount on the elementary chiller, which was the plan with this ESSER fund the whole time. So we can pay the billed amount. We'll then turn around and put that to NDE under the GMS, and then they will reimburse us for that, and it will just go back in the building fund. So there'll be money out, money in directly. I just wanted you to have a heads up because we're going to have to do that here this week probably and get that taken care of.
Brandon, how long does it take them to reimburse?
I don't know that for certain. I can ask them when we send it. Building update, building is on time, on budget. Granted, it's early stages. I will be sharing a 5-week schedule with you. We had a meeting today. Something I want you to note on your schedule is the add alternates. There's a page on the budget for add alternates. They've started putting dates assigned to those add alternates where we're going to have to probably make some decisions by those dates. I have not dug into those at all. They were just highlighted this afternoon. Take a peek at them. I'm sure we'll have more conversations as far as those things go. Yeah, I think they're happy with the progress. Obviously, when you start getting walls stood, it looks a lot different than when you're digging and pouring foundation and grading. On the 5-week schedule, you're going to see more walls stood, you're going to see roofs being put on, you're going to see concrete in the parking lots. These next 5 weeks, you'll probably see some pretty significant change on the site.
The practice field looks way better. So are you able to use it yet? Are they still saying, are you guys on it yet? No?
We are not, and that was at Chad and Robert's request, because they were not going to be able to change the crown, and with some of the infill that needs done, they weren't trusting of it to be a secure surface. So they're going to make it right this fall. We're going to get through, already halfway through the season. We're going to get through the season, make it work, and make sure that that surface is right when we get to it in the spring.
Just ask for 5% of the total project.
Matt heard you, he can help me. Panorama. If you remember last spring, we talked about mental health supports, increasing our mental health supports. We have an opportunity through SU2 with a grant. We had to do an MOU. At the time, they were going to do a Bright Bite survey. That has changed. Bright Bites got bought out. It's now a Panorama survey that is used. We have access to it. We can share those things. Probably the biggest difference that they highlighted between Bright Bites and Panorama, Josh, tell me if I'm wrong here. Bright Bites was very personal. You feel, you think, you see these sorts of things. Panorama is more, this is my perception of the student body. This is my perception of the teaching staff. It's more large group than it is very specific individual. But again, to stay in this grant and to utilize the mental health supports that we're currently using, we've got to do it this fall, and then we've got to do it probably at the end of the year with the survey. Josh, anything to add there?
I can send you the questions up front, but a lot of the questions when all this was happening before with the other survey, we already do a culture and climate survey internally, so we're obviously trying not to duplicate that effort, but this could be something, if approved, obviously would not only support the mental health supports that we receive, but also would qualify as both, the more climate type cultural survey we ask for family feedback in terms of what's happening in our buildings as well. So we just didn't want to duplicate.
Just a quick question. Do any of the surveys that we do specifically ask about bullying in our school?
In the past, yes. To what extent, I don't know. I wouldn't have an answer for you. Very general. It might ask, is bullying a problem in your school?
Where does that get asked? And when was the last time?
Again, I don't have that right now for
But I
you.
mean, is that something you could look
Is
at?
it something we could add? Absolutely, yeah.
Within the last month, we got an email with some surveys in it. Is that what this is? Or was that something different or something we aren't going to be using? Some survey language for
Yeah.
grade school, middle school, I think staff and students.
Yeah, so those are per request of the board, those are the survey questions that go out that are specifically related to the counseling services that are provided at the elementary, middle school, and high school. The counseling survey at the high school, and I can't remember exactly what Mr. Harris calls it, is the survey that he sends out specifically is something that he had developed. The other survey is a third-party developed survey, which is why we want to make sure that we send out all the language for those questions. And if parents want to opt out at that time, then they have enough notice that they can, look that over, ask any questions they may have, and then opt out if they so choose.
And is that separate than what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, what Josh is talking about is climate culture that goes to our 5-year review
For accreditation.
This could replace that in the future.
What's
We're
being,
talking about
what's,
tonight.
yes,
Okay.
yes. It would be a replacement for
Because it
that.
sounds awful similar to me.
It is,
Yeah.
and we generally, every 2 years, we could do this every year, we've done it every 2 years. And generally, we do it in October, so generally, we do it in the fall of the year that it's being administered, that would be this fall. So once we get to that point, we can, discuss that, and then that's the piece that gets disaggregated, we break it apart, there's open-ended questions, feedback that stakeholders, various community, students, teachers are able to provide as well, and then we give a full report to the board based on those findings. And you'll see all the results of those questions as well.
Okay, last thing I have, last week, building committee met with BBH to talk about FF&E options, some that need to come before the whole board to kind of give some direction. So BBH is here tonight. I'll have them come up. They'll have a presentation. One thing to highlight here that is still not yet 100% clear is move-in date. I shared with building committee that my understanding all along has been essentially December of 2024 would be completion date. What was shared 3 weeks ago and then what was reiterated today was at least parts of the building are going to have to be accessible, which makes sense. We're going to do the cafeteria in the summer, you've got 3 classrooms displaced. They're going to do the shop, you've got 2 classrooms displaced. Those areas we're going to have to access, but I think there's still an outside chance, at least at this point in time, that they think that we could have access to the whole building as of August 2024, which is great because it gets done. What it does for us internally is it requires some heads up at least, because with 5th grade, that transition wasn't going to happen until August of 2025 because we weren't going to do it midterm in December 24. So if everything's going to change in August of 24, we've got to expedite some planning internally as far as classes and instruction. I just wanted that laid out there because that did come up and I didn't want anybody caught off guard.
But if for some reason you don't feel comfortable with it, they could just stay.
Yes,
for 1 more year.
if we don't get it put together, they
Right,
stay 1 more
so-
year,
so
we're
it- that'd
okay.
be-
We definitely won't force it.
Okay.
If we're ready, we'll go, and if we're not, then we'll make do. So Matt?
Do you want us to sit in a special place?
Be comfortable.
Thank you. All right, good evening. We had an opportunity to meet with the building committee earlier this week and discuss a few options for furniture procurement. Again, my name is Matt Wagner with BBH. I'm joined by Tori Rosenfeld with also BBH. Tori, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I am new to, well, almost a year. I've been at BBH. I started in October of last year. I came from a firm that specialized in hospitality design and healthcare. And previously to that, I worked at a furniture dealer in Omaha on Shepherd's Business Interior for about 4 years. So I'm the furniture and fixtures and equipment coordinator for BBH and do all the furniture specification for our larger projects.
Right. So it's very timely because Tori's been working with me and Cynthia to get everyone ready for furniture procurement. So we have an allowance established within the budget. So you have an opportunity to fill the new classrooms. So what the slideshow that we put together is really doing is just to highlight where those are and then just the paths forward of those options that Brandon was talking about as how you want to procure that furniture. So really quickly, you have your typical classroom areas within the academics. You have the green areas, which are your typical plans or your classrooms. You have some meeting rooms, which are highlighted in more specialty meeting rooms, which are highlighted blue, special education rooms. You do have science rooms, but all of that furniture is already in project because it is specialty. It's custom built as lab equipment. So you have that as you move forward. And you have an admin area on that lower level, right when you come into the front door. That's your new reception for the high school. That's highlighted in red. Your CTE classrooms to the top of the plan. You'll have 2 typical classrooms, but then one of those CTE classrooms is more of a computer lab. So you have computer desks and things like that. Again, the same types of classrooms on the main level. The common space, which is right in the middle of that plan, you do have the opportunity to do more flexible types of furniture, more impromptu meeting, educational space, curriculum space for your teachers that's breakout. So a lot of flexibility there. It can be, we have no preconceived notion about what that is, but it really is, now's the time to start thinking about what you would like there. And then you have some auxiliary spaces. We talked a little bit about your cafeteria. Right now, the furniture you have there is perfectly adequate. You could add to that if you really wanted to. Sound like really just more space is what you need there. So it's within the scope, but not necessarily needed at this time. And then your locker room space, you have your training room and a couple of offices there. So with all of those different areas, you have a pretty diverse list of equipment or furniture that you can only provide for your new addition. So right now, the 2 paths forward is either a bid, a hard bid procurement process, or a partnership process. So we'll kind of lay out what that means. First, the bid process, it's very much like the design of the building. We have a kickoff meeting, we have initial design selections, a series of just design, very iterative process, probably like 10 to 12 meetings where we would like to meet with your group, like a core group, to hone in on your exact furniture selections. Put together a bid package, selecting everything in triplicate, send it out to vendors and get a bid. So it's a very traditional process. For timeline, it does add some significant time factors that we just need to be aware of. So with that upfront work, we are looking at about 8 weeks longer process than if you were to partnership, and we'll show you that too. So with that furniture specification, it'll take us approximately 2 months to do that. It'll take a month and a half to bid it. Then ordering the furniture is a fairly lengthy process, and then there's installation, there's delivery, installation, and making sure it's all correct, it's all finished. And so what we would recommend is, based on what Brandon was talking about as far as a move-in next June, to have the building ready for classes in August, we would recommend starting that now. So there's just a lot of upfront work, working over the holidays to make that process go. And stop me along the way, Tori, jump in along the way. The partnership process, it streamlines that what I just described. With this procurement process, you are partnering with a vendor. You have the opportunity to interview your 3 different vendors and select one, but then they take over the design selections. We work with them directly to pick that out in triplicate.
Yeah, so what would happen is once we decide which furniture dealer we would want to work with, I would start and initiate those conversations based on a couple initial meetings for kind of the furniture discussions we've had. So we would probably have those showroom tours, and then after we decide, we would have internal meeting 1 or 2 just as a kickoff to really figure out and hone in what you want in those furniture areas. And then I can bring it back to that furniture dealer to iterate what those ideas are, and they create that package of first proposed furniture pieces for each area of the building. And once that comes along, we can set up a secondary meeting to go over those and make any revisions. And the next meeting would have any of those revisions along with any finished selections that we would propose with it to be able to provide those comments and recommendations on revision. And then one other meeting for final review to follow that. before furniture procurement would actually happen. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand process with going with partner. They have a lot more quick detailing and turnaround than what we would be able to do in a bid situation, where we would have to come up with all of the front-end specs for every single piece of furniture based on our conversations, and then bring it out to bid, and we could either have it as an opportunity for the furniture dealers we open it up to provide alternates, or we close it out and say they have to provide pricing based on those exact pieces. Typically, that pricing doesn't get you very much competition, but it does at least showcase who can provide what. You just can't get those proprietary brands specifically by opening it up to those vendors. So then typically you have multiple furniture dealers that you then have to select from for certain pieces of furniture.
Right,
So the partnership just alleviates some of that stress and those stressors so that we can really hone in on what pieces of furniture we need and can move forward with that, but still providing that opportunity for mock-ups, testing furniture, and also seeing and hand-holding like actual finishes. Does that make sense?
Quick question. So bid, you're looking at multiple manufacturers, vendors, you look at multiple pieces. If you went a partnership and selected one vendor, do they do then an internal bid process as far as the manufacturer that it's coming from? Or is it, if we go with Shepherd's, for example, if we go with Shepherd's, we have one line that we have to pick from?
No, so typically we would select, in a partnership standpoint, we would go and select which furniture dealer we like the largest proprietary brand of, the aesthetic, the durability, the function of the furniture. And then once we partner with them, we can use any of the open line manufacturers that they also can procure from, as well as that whole umbrella of furniture that like Steelcase has offering from. So it's not just Steelcase, it's Smith Systems, it's all those other things, just like Herman Miller now has Knoll, so it has all those other ancillary groups that we could procure from, along with like the other open line items that are really prominent, like VS and those other educational furniture groups too. Does that answer your question?
How do we ensure competitive pricing there?
In a partnership standpoint, we have some further information. So I went ahead and Shepherd's provided us a few different scenarios that they've provided from previous projects this year and last to show a depiction of what those cost comparisons would be from a bid scenario, partnership, and then a premier partner discounting structure. So scenario one is that bid. They were just a part of the bid. However, then they brought any items within that RFP into a partnerships standpoint, which is based strictly on the Omnia purchasing contract. With the scenario 2B, the very last option, they're able to use that Omnia partnership contract. However, they can double up and use the premier partner discounting in structure. So volume is a really large indicator of how deep we can get discounts when we premier partner with furniture dealers. So just by the two partnership options and then the bid strictly, there's sometimes very competitive and larger discounting opportunities available to us if we partner directly. Bidding right now has been so difficult with just the nature of the world after post-pandemic and things kind of making manufacturing really difficult. So the furniture cost might stay almost exactly the same from dealer to dealer, especially for open line items. Most open line items will get very similar pricing because of that Omnia partnering contract that they're required to hold for your kind of organization. So education contracts are strictly told that furniture dealers have to abide by this price, and they can't sell it for more, or, and it's usually the least that they can get it discounted for you. So the only competitiveness with a bid typically is shipping and their installation costs. So typically dealers will kind of give and take with those portions to really get the bid down to a point to win it. That's what we've seen typically at this point for the last few years that I've dealt with bid and partnership.
So with this example of the case study, it kind of shows you what in the scenario one with the hard bid, you get a standard discount, but the more you bundle, the deeper the discounts can actually be. And so scenario 2A, where you're partnering using the Omni and purchasing contract that Tori's talking about, you can go outside of that. You can pick exactly the same piece of furniture that's going to be the same color, the desired function that you really want. You won't get a deepest discount, but it gives you flexibility to give you exactly what you want. But the more you bundle, the deeper the discount is going to be. So at the end of it, we just put together just a few other items to consider. It goes back to that timeline. By partnering, you do save time over the traditional bid process. You're taking all of that design work and you're giving it directly to the vendor who give you real-time pricing, who can give you exact options about other alternative chairs and desks and everything that you're looking for, and it gets it to you a lot faster, so you're able to make decisions a lot faster. And then there's just that, it streamlines the process. You're able to have transparency. You're competitively bidding it between the different lines, as Tori was talking about. And you get, from our standpoint, you just have the best quality and price, quality and pricing for the best bang for the buck. And then lastly, you really do, you're building a relationship with that vendor. So if there's an issue with some chairs, you call that one person and they come out and fix it. If you want to order, say you're doing a classroom retrofit late 5 years down the line, you can call that same vendor. So they will be your partner even beyond the initial installation to make sure that you're taking care of it, to come out if there's warranty issues or to help you. So that we see a lot of value in just establishing that relationship. And so our recommendation would be to partner for all the things we've talked about, but we're happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
To many people, it doesn't seem like scenario one would be recommended, certainly not recommended, but do many people choose it?
Very
There's-
rarely, but.
Yeah, there's still quite a few cities and local groups that really strive for that bidding process, just to make sure that it's a fair game for everyone. So the approach of partnership, where we actually go and interview and get the opportunity to a few of the dealers within our local groups, kind of still provides that interview process and RFP process, but it's just more of a CMR kind of approach with it instead of physically hard bidding it.
Right.
So I actually had somebody from Shepherd's come in and sit down and talk to me just about the process. Because again, this is educational for me as well. And he shared all of this. There's a bid, there's partnership, there's all kinds of stuff you can do, there's piloting, there's some other program that I don't have written down.
There's so many
Yeah.
many options.
So there's lots of options, but what he shared was, here are some schools that I've worked with very recently, please feel free to reach out to them. And I shared it with the committee, so I reached out to DC West, Platteview, and Ashland. I did not get a response from DC West yet. I haven't called Melissa, I sent an email, but I haven't followed up. Jason at Ashland, they did a partnership with Shepherd's and came in under budget. And who was the other one? Ryan Saunders at Platteview. not completely familiar with the process because he kind of came in midstream, I think. He knows they did a partnership, he knows it was with Shepherd's, but he couldn't give me any other details at that time. So those were the three that I reached out to.
So recently, since my time at BBH, I've worked on a couple projects that I came in midstream with and helped finish up, but one was a complete bid opportunity, and I'm still working to finish that one out just because of construction, and then we already had set in furniture ordering processes because we had to hold pricing with the bid process. So that was another issue, is we had to order by a certain date. We couldn't push that date back because they were already holding that bid pricing for the only 60 days that they're allowed through a bid process. But if we partnered with someone, they'd be able to ask for special alleviations of that to be able to push that out, as well as if we needed to order by a certain date to keep construction moving forward and also secure that product, we'd be able to phase it out a little bit easier too. With a bidding process, those options are kind of restricted from a furniture standpoint. So that was another benefit to a couple of the projects, was the one that we bid out. I didn't have a lot of flexibility in working with the furniture dealers to push out installation dates because they didn't have the warehousing available to hold the product. So we had to install furniture in a construction zone, which was not a great idea. We have a lot of furniture that's damaged and a lot of finger pointing because of it, which doesn't help with warranty. But the other project that I did was a full partnership, phased out, and we were able to push back installation dates as needed, work with construction on what those dates were, and make sure that that budget was hit and didn't go over after the bidding process too, because sometimes after bidding, if you select alternate pieces of furniture, the finishes and such that you already selected might not work on that piece of furniture, so you have to reselect, which takes more time and could result in more money. So there's just a few different things that are really great about bidding, some things that are a little painful, but in the end, it's 100% your decision. I'm happy to work hand in hand with whatever process you guys feel is right for your community. But we can definitely alleviate some of those pain points that you have with just making sure the fairness opportunity is there from a publicity standpoint, if we need to, by providing renderings of furniture that we might be selecting or giving opportunity for you to actually see and show the process that we're working on, if that's something that would be helpful.
So in a partnership versus a bid, who shows up for the partnership? Are the same people that show up for the bid? Same companies? I mean, like Shepherd would show up for both?
Yeah,
So basically it's the same. So
it depends on how you
the
work.
same
with it.
suspects will work, come to a bid will probably be the same ones that you're gonna work with to choose who you're gonna use.
Yeah.
We would, ideally, we would interview the same Shepherd's, AOI, who's
And Encompass.
or three that we work with.
So if we went through the bid process or the partnership and say Shepherd's your choice on both, what's the difference? Other than you have three people bidding to see who wants the bid.
Typically with a bid process, you would select who gives the furniture at the lowest price per item. So you select it on a per item basis. So it could be 3 or 4 different vendors that you end up getting furniture from.
So Shepherd,
It could be Shepherd's, it could be.
but Shepherd's would
Encompass.
represent multiple furniture companies.
Yeah, but they might not secure the lowest price.
So that's why we say it complicates things by bidding it, because you might be working with vendors, 5 different vendors who provide different groups of furniture, and then you have 5 different people to call if there's a warranty.
And they might propose an alternate that you think looks great on paper because it is a lower price, but you don't have the opportunity to outweigh the durability of it. So you might not be getting the quality that you need and want if you go that route of providing alternates and accepting alternates. So that's something that we internally would just talk about when it comes to that bidding process as well, accepting or not accepting. from a partnership standpoint with what you're saying is, yes, we would have pretty much the same dealerships locally that would be bidding on it. We would just select all those furniture pieces that we want them to provide pricing for initially. So our meetings would be a lot more heavy on the front end instead of me just kind of running it behind the scenes on what I've heard you guys say, what you guys want, and then me running with it and providing you just a few meetings versus a bunch of meetings up front, if that makes sense. And then having multiple meetings after the bid process to make sure that we're getting what you want at the cost that we need to.
Would both scenarios have some sort of input time frame from teachers as well?
Yeah, we would make sure in those initial meetings that we met with the groups that we need to in order to get their initial feedback. And then when we break out into a further discussion, like in a partnership scenario, I would bring in the groups on a need-by-need basis, and we'd review by department or as a whole group, whatever you see fit.
And would both scenarios actually have furniture physically in the buildings so they can see it, so that figure out what's best for it?
We can initially bring in a few mock-ups in a bid situation, but it would be mainly like, okay, we have these 3 pieces of classroom chairs. Which one do you like best? Whereas if we go down the partnership route, we could physically go to the showroom and they could bring in as many as we would want to see and actually test them out, or bring them to your school and have a class pilot it for a certain amount of time too, if we get it started soon enough.
Yeah, we have a lot of good experience working with like a committee as teachers, administrators, even we worked with students before to just test furniture. Exactly what Tori was, we mock out the classroom, they come in, they see it, tell us what they like and don't like, and it helps us with decision making.
Other questions for BVH? I think what's necessary from the board is not necessarily action to say we want to investigate the partnership, we want to investigate the bid process, but we've got to give BVH some sort of direction to bring back to the building committee and the whole board as to if it's going to be a partnership, we've got to go through and the action item would be approving that partnership, or we want to go the bid route, the action item would be approving or enacting BVH to act on our behalf to put specs together, send it out to bid, and then those bids will come back. Fair? Any strong opinions from the board?
I wouldn't say a strong opinion, but can you go back, I mean, when I look at that, typically the only benefit of a bid scenario is cost savings, right? Theoretically, you do a hard bid because theoretically it's supposed to save you money. I can't identify a single benefit of the bid scenario based on what you have laid out. So what am I missing? What would be the pro column on the bid side?
The pro column on the bid side would be that you get to select proprietary brands from multiple proprietary brands. You won't have to just select one. So if we go with Herman Miller, we can't pick any steel case furniture. So
In which scenario?
if you go with bid, or if you go with partnership, sorry. So bidding would allow you to pick from Herman Miller. It would let you pick from Steelcase or from Hayworth. You'd be able to select from all of the proprietary brands. But because you would be splitting it up to all of those brands, their discounting is going to be strictly on that Omnia pricing. It's not going to be a deep dive into the partnership because volume wouldn't be there. So your pricing just wouldn't be as competitive as if you would pick one and partner with them to provide that bulk of furniture.
Clarify the one for me.
Yeah.
like if it were, we go with a partnership and it's steel case, is it one line or are there like multiple branches
Anything
under the
under
umbrella?
anything under the Steelcase umbrella. So they have partnership with Smith Systems, with West Elm. They have over 50 partnerships under their umbrella. So we can bundle and save from all of those manufacturers that they have under that main proprietary umbrella, along with picking and pulling from any of those open lines that they might not be a proprietary group of, but we can still purchase from them. We just won't get as deep of a discount based on volume from them. With going from a bid, you will have all those open line companies that you can select furniture from, VS, Virgo, whatever you want, really. And just bid it out and then get those prices back, and then we figure out what's gonna be best for your budget. But if we, so it's lots of domino effect and puzzle pieces having to fit perfectly together in a bid situation. But up front, when we're creating those bid specs, I do a bunch of the bid preparation work to figure out if what we're presenting would fall under your budget. So we wouldn't be presenting anything that wouldn't be out of your budget.
So a bid process gives you more choices.
More choice.
Okay.
So you have multiple umbrellas,
Gotcha.
Multiple umbrellas.
so.
And then
You can
people
puddle jump
coming
a
in,
little
what you're saying, the biggest, we like partnerships because you're more familiar with them. It makes more sense for you guys how you do business to do a partnership.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's less expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need maximum, what we need is
Well, but-
not to be able to pick from 10 different
Well,
proprietary.
but the conversation we had
softwares.
in our building
Yeah,
committee
if I
was
could
the
finish,
opposite.
Mike. It isn't to have maximum and be able to pick from 10 different proprietary brands, it's to save money and have flexibility,
But
right?
I still think a bid process traditionally would probably might end up being less than a standardized because you're having multiple vendors bid against each other to get our business. Okay, I think that's I'm good.
Well, okay, so
There's definitely opportunity for it to fall that way, but from what I've seen in the last few years, it hasn't fallen that way. The last project that we bid, we were actually over by almost $100,000 over after bid.
When was that bid?
That the project's still being completed through warranty. It was Columbus Public Library.
Okay, so you gotta clarify, because I hear you saying both ways.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying, on one hand, it could come in lower, on the other hand, it generally doesn't come in lower. So,
It used to all the time come in.
and what is used to?
In the last 8 years, it started to dwindle. So 8 years ago, it was very competitive. Up to 6 years ago, I think it was a very big wash. It could or it couldn't.
Okay.
Now, after post-pandemic, we're seeing that it's not been very competitive.
The bid scenario.
Correct.
So you're gonna get better discounts through the partnership. I mean, is that what this comes down to? I
Yeah.
wanna make sure that I'm.
Point blank, the partnership approach, you are able to capture bigger discounts
Okay.
by working with these type of partnerships for those purchasing contracts. The bid process absolutely could come in less than that, but it's a risk. I mean, depending on what furniture we pick, we can talk about that right now, but until we pick the exact furniture, we run the numbers, we know exactly what umbrellas we're all choosing from. You know, it's gonna be, it might come down to bid day.
It would also be a larger fee through BBH to put that bid package together. For partnership, it would be a less fee from us because it wouldn't take me as much time to put together all of those front-end specs.
Just to clarify that we've already,
Yeah.
it's already.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
already,
So
sorry.
we're good, we're
Okay.
partnering
Sorry.
whichever direction
Yeah.
you go. So
But
it's
can we
not-
pick both? Can we say work up the bid and look at partnership too?
If there's certain portions of the building that you would want to partner directly with to get those maximized items and then just select through bits and pieces and try to do a bid, I saw that very helpful in the Columbus Library because of how much furniture they had in the building. But with this project, I don't think it's large enough that you would be rewarded for
one thing I heard her say that to me makes sense is we just got to talk about potential timeline. December, maybe August, we don't know. And you mentioned people warehousing it, and then there's all sorts of damage done if they're warehousing it in the construction zone. That would worry me some too from the bid side.
Yeah, that's why we put together the timeline, and knowing that the possible move-in date, the building completion date, June next year, and then move-in date, possibly, where classes could start August. That puts you, we really need to start thinking of that now to accelerate that time. And partnership does give you that, like I said, it's a streamlined process where a lot of decision-making happens. We require less meetings from all of you, and we're able to kind of push that forward for me and
And based on your needs, I would just make sure that we would select and propose dealers that I know would give you what you needed and have the resources available for what we would need for this project. So that would be another benefit, because bidding, you could get anybody that doesn't have warehouse space, that doesn't have their own proprietary install room, that just doesn't provide you the service that is always wonderful.
So if we're gonna, I guess, lean toward a bid process, when do we need to start that as opposed to if we're gonna lean toward a partnership process?
both scenarios, we would say would start immediately, because that end date, as I mentioned, from next summer, we really need to get that first procured.
So they would both have to process over the same amount of time when we're starting that.
Just because of if you guys really want to provide the opportunity for your groups to sit test and actually see physical furniture, I would probably start sooner than later. That ordering and manufacturing timeline could definitely shrink if we went a partnership route, because we would be able to select from furniture groups and vendors that had a certain amount of timeline too. So for manufacturing, we could just make sure that we select better lead time options as needed, but not give up durability and quality in the process.
Brandon, you said both Platteview and Ashland did the partnership.
Correct.
Did you guys work on either one of those?
We did not, no.
I know Ashland was,
Oh, you're okay.
Ashland was DLR, and I'm not sure who Platteview was.
And one of those two came under budget.
Ashland for sure was under budget.
The other gentleman.
Ryan wasn't sure where things were.
Yeah, again, it's very much like a CMR process where you're partnering with somebody to help procure furniture versus build your building. So exactly what you went through with ECL, interview potential options, and then you select one to help you price out the building and build it. It's very much the same process.
Quite frankly, I don't want a bunch more meetings. And I've never picked out a piece of furniture. I don't know what's better price-wise. One thing says this, my brain says different. And I've never bought furniture.
And that's another great thing about doing partnership is those vendors that we work with see it every day. They see the quality that has been installed, and they can tell you, I'm not gonna recommend that piece of furniture to you.
You could
Because
probably
I've
do
seen
that,
it.
could you do that same thing by calling Ashland or Platteview and saying what's good furniture and what's not? I mean, I'm just,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely
I mean,
a possibility
they're all around
visit
us.
those schools, yeah.
We can always,
I'm just,
set up interviews or tours to go and see how the furniture is holding up before making those decisions.
How far out would you want the project to be? So obviously Ashland, were they in their space?
They're in one of the spaces for certain. They have two different buildings.
So durability, you're not gonna see in the first 6 months, I would imagine, right? How far out do you need to get to truly get a
I
sense
mean,
of
I would
durability?
hope you wouldn't see it by then, but
Right.
that would be the testament to the furniture. If it was showing some wear, you would know. If the fabric that they've selected isn't holding up, you could see that, because typically typically fabric is only warranted for a year. So it would be about that time frame. But you would definitely see wear and tear by 6 months if the furniture was not holding up.
I want to see something about the 2-year mark.
Shepherd's and other dealerships in the area definitely have furniture that's been in the building for longer. So we can, and we can always ask them what those schools might be so that we can get some ideas.
So we need to do action now. Where's the superintendent report, right?
Yes, we're still in the superintendent report. Direction is what we need. I'm not sure we need action, formal action, unless it's, going to get split up. We gotta figure out what to do there.
I like the simplicity of the partnership, but I don't know if it saves us money or not. And I like the idea of one vendor, if there's a problem, we call one person and get it all fixed. And with the remodel, who knows if that timeline stays, I don't foresee anything really shoving our timeline up or back. And with one vendor, even if we do happen to get it in August, even though they're talking September, October, how flexible are they if we're saying September, October, and all of a sudden we get to April and MCL says, hey, we're gonna be in August?
Hey, Matt, question for you guys. It's a great surprise we're moving that being got moved to August. What happened and why was this something that just came now? Not, I mean, we haven't had much rain. We had much light, a little bit, got 2 weeks behind, but I mean, that's only 2 weeks, and we're talking a whole 4 months
Yeah.
earlier. So, because this seems like this got jumped to us, or if it was something we knew this was gonna happen, what happened there? Just so I have.
We've been working with MCL, trying to get kind of a large, complete schedule for the entirety of the project. And so that was one of the things they shared with us today. But in previous discussions, we've been talking about, is it December, is it August? And so they had previously told us it may be December of '24. But they felt like just the efficiency of the workers, if they could really tackle the classrooms and get those done, it really comes down to labor. You know, if they can be the most efficient with their labor and get everything done, and all the materials were here, the labor will have it installed by June, and they'll have a pretty good idea of what it is. So they felt like it would be advantageous to get it done sooner rather than later. Because they also know that the cafeteria needs to be done. They need to do work in the existing building for the HVAC upgrades. So they have a lot on their plate, and I think they're looking at the big picture as well, trying to get as much as they can done when they can. So any more detail now, we'll have to go back through MCL. That's a good question.
Well, and is it fair to say that we really have no idea until we see what winter's gonna bring?
We're-
Can we get it boxed in so they can start doing finish? Like, it is really premature to think that we're gonna be in August of 2024.
You took the words right out of my mouth. With winter, you never know.
Yeah.
Or next spring, we can get a bunch of rain, but really winter, we'll have the building enclosed.
That's the big,
That's
that's
the
the big
big-
item. You get it enclosed, we're on, we'll be good.
We're good. And then it's just about working inside the building. But it's,
That's the if. We gotta
You-
just have to
you
see if
never
they can
know.
get it enclosed.
we could have a supply chain issue with something with interior finishes or anything like that. So we kind of see it all and we'll have to course correct as needed, but the plan right now looks fairly optimistic. So
So on that,
stays.
on that note, when MCL was given, I think, when we were talking about initial timelines months ago, they weren't sure how long it was gonna take precast to get here, they weren't sure how long it was gonna take HVAC, they built in a bunch of, and I'm assuming they built in some extra time to begin with, and then it seemed like it got here a little quicker than they anticipated.
That's definitely part of it too. They're able to get the big pieces here sooner than they anticipated.
Back to the furniture thing, what I'd like to see is still be open-minded about the bid process, and if there is a type of furniture or a specific part of the project that it might make sense to do a bid on, and then partnership on the rest of it to get maybe the best of both worlds. I would encourage the committee to look at that, if that's a possibility. Because you might end up paying a little bit more if you get better quality and maybe a better warranty and better usability over the long term on some things, but partnership would be a more streamlined process for stuff that maybe isn't that prone to destruction or excessive use. So I don't know, not knowing that much about that aspect of it, I guess I'd like to be kind of a hybrid if possible, best of both worlds. So the answer is yes. Yes.
Any expertise on that? Ever done a situation like that?
The Columbus Library was a mix. They did all of their main workstations and private offices, and then some of the proprietary brands were Herman Miller. So all of their workstations, private offices, and some of those ancillary pieces were all partnered through AOI. They were able to keep the budget for those items kind of figured out, and then be able to bid out the other items to figure out where we needed to be to get those other lounge pieces of furniture or makerspace pieces of furniture that they needed.
Do you think you could potentially come up with a list of items that, in your professional expertise, you would maybe hard bid, just to maybe get a better quality product?
I think it's 100% based on what kind of aesthetic you're wanting in the building. I definitely have my preferences on furniture for education, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go with another vendor, because I mean the AOI for Herman Miller, Steelcase, and Hayward's, those are probably my three that I would push or recommend as larger furniture vendors, but their offering and their aesthetic is quite different. All of them will have office furniture, administrative furniture, and like other classroom pieces that you need. They'll just be quite a bit different in what they have for case studies or availability for sit tests and mock-up kind of opportunities. So I think it's 100%, do you want to see the furniture and let your students test it out beforehand? Or do you want to just bid it out and try to save the money and get more umbrella furniture in your school?
Question for you. So is there some reason to believe that the quality will be lower under a partnership perspective than under a bid scenario? That was the sense that I got from some of the questions, was the things that we need durability, let's bid those out, and the rest, let's do a partnership. And that, in my mind, sort of says to me, we think quality will suffer under partnership versus bid. Has that been your experience, or is there any reason to think that wouldn't be the case?
No, I think what we do is still shoot, if it's a bid scenario versus partnership, we'd be still selecting from the same group, like furniture groups. But it would be, we would want to standardize it as best we can. So it's not necessarily a quality conversation, it's more of a standardization question, or in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong. But you can still, so quality has nothing to do with it, and we would never recommend in either scenario anything that would last. So whether it's the desk and chairs, office furniture.
You won't be getting anything
fabrics.
from Nebraska Furniture Mart in
Right.
the partnership round.
Right.
It'll all be commercial furniture, commercially grade, durability standards for BIFMA, and all of the other standardized requirements of furniture for commercial use. So I would make sure that whatever they're proposing doesn't leave you hanging at the end of the day in any situation.
Is there a reason to believe that one proprietary brand is better for office furniture, for example, and one proprietary brand is better for classroom chairs, like where maybe that would be the scenario where different proprietary brands are better for different applications, and that's what we would be sacrificing?
I
on
think
the
it'll
partnership side?
definitely be more the classroom furniture. So I would provide you with links of the companies and make sure that you saw what their educational furniture looked like and what offering they have for those classroom environments. Because I think that's where you're gonna need to make sure the partnership is good for. All three of the vendors that I've stated all have educational furniture. It might just be on the higher end or like higher education or that high school level and higher, but the others might have a whole plethora. So you could streamline your look if you needed to get furniture for other schools, for your elementary, middle, and high at a later date. So you can streamline that aesthetic easier by going with certain vendors over another. But for now, since we're only talking really about high school, all three would provide you what you needed. It's really 100% aesthetic at this day and age, and the communities and customer service that you'd be receiving from those groups is what would drive me to select from certain dealers over the other. And I think that's why partnership, being able to interview them and ask those questions of what's important to you guys as a group would be able to be done. In a bid situation, you don't really have that opportunity to ask the dealer what their main resources are. That's me just telling you firsthand what I've seen.
So for today's conversation, Tori, we could interview or go on showroom tours of 3 different vendors, but then to choose to bid part of it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to go the route if at the end of the day you decided you'd rather just
Yeah, so if you
move
think
forward,
that
or
would
you
be,
saw something from
Right.
each one that you really fell in love with, we could definitely go that route and do a 3-part partnership, 2-part partnership, and split it evenly down the middle between 2 different dealers if that's what you'd like. And I can coordinate all of those logistical things. So if that's something that you'd be interested in at the end of the day after thinking about it, it definitely doesn't need to be decided right now. We have a few weeks that we can allow for some time to mull it over. Because it is a lot of information and it's a big decision.
And we're talking building committee that would go on these sit test or.
I would probably limit it to a smaller group,
Yeah.
4 or 5 individuals is the max that I would probably have involved in.
yeah, building committee plus if you had to select a couple of teachers, that would be extremely helpful.
But I would have to make sure that the decision maker and who gets to say yes and no to whoever is going is there to be the set in stone kind of, this is our expectation.
And remind me, what is our furniture? How much money are we talking about here? What's our furniture allowance?
So for the allowance, we worked with Shepherd's during design, and they took a look at the building plans, exactly what I showed you, and they gave us kind of a middle of the line, not the most expensive, not the extreme cost effective, middle of the line, it's $425,000. So all the areas that we talked about for new furniture. So whatever, but if you decide to go the partnership route, we could share that number with them, but it would be up to them to bid it and come in under there. So through the competitive bidding process, they vet Shepherd's or any other vendor that if you chose the partnership route.
Sorry for another silly question, I'm sure. And the dollar amounts that are right there are what dollar amounts?
So that was a case study. Yeah, so it's another school project that Shepherd's put together. Classrooms, it's a comparative number.
Bob, I know where you're going with what your comments were earlier, and I'm always for trying to bid. I feel like we're overthinking this. That just my personal thought. For $420,000, which is no small chunk of change.
It's not too
That's my thought.
425 out of $40 million project. That's right.
Well, I like the partnership. I don't want to grab all of this.
Seems excessive.
Especially if it comes back higher with the smart, you're not really going to be able to
So what do we, just general direction from this?
I don't feel strongly either way. Leave it up to the committee.
Great. We trust you.
Just don't screw it up.
Yeah. A lot of pressure.
That's good direction. Thanks.
Great, yeah. Mike
I know
looks
where
like
it's
he wants
going.
to.
I know where it's gonna go.
Mike looks like he wants to go all over the states.
It's ready for a road trip.
I just struggle with the same people are gonna be doing both. So you just made, I mean, that's where I struggle, that if they're all gonna be, both are gonna be doing it, well, then make them bid to see it. And one already knows kind of what our bid is, because he's one of the ones that set our bid amount. So, that's just me, but again, we're a committee, we're 6 people, and there's 3 on our committee, and
Well, could we have the multiple people that you mentioned tonight, can they have the same access that one had and have a bid off that?
We offer just a budget comparison, just to give them an idea of what they would see in the project.
but again, I'm
It's not a very
one
typical
of these
Yeah.
things, so it's okay to be, not always agree. And I would tell you, Brett, you're for more partnership, and I think Renee, you would say you were lean towards a partnership.
I'm a little bit with Brett. Given the amount of money at stake, I'm for the thing that requires the least involvement of our time, given some of the other
Agreed.
things that I think are probably bigger ticket items that we could invest
It is
our
unknown
time
the
in.
savings, but if we just, for example, what if it got crazy and the market changed a little bit, and we could save 75,000 if we did a bid? That's 75,000 real dollars.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's
that
where I'm
matters to me.
That's where I'm in my world, that's how I look at things.
Yeah.
So that's where we can agree, disagree.
Anything.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you guys want to, you partnership, so I'd say lean towards partnership, go that route.
If we can set up just some tours as part of the next steps, and then we can start taking inventory of the existing furniture that you would like to use. It may not be a lot, but really we're talking about new furniture, new classroom spaces. So there's definitely some steps leading up to that, but if you'd like us to reach out to different suppliers, we can do that as a partnership approach.
Or if you want me to start by showing you the vendors that I would recommend, and you tell me which, if you want to just see 2 of them, based on that list, then that's something we can do too.
Yeah, would that just be a letter of intent or something like that? We could ask for that from each vendor,
Yeah, I can just ask for their, like a free
proposal or something like that.
proposal for
Just send that
services.
to you,
Mike, the other thing I actually like about the partnership piece is the idea of bringing things in and letting the teachers and students
Well, it can be
be a
done.
voice.
It can too. We would just have to be more, involved in the process of the partnership. We would have to go to that school, we would have to go and look at the furniture. On the partnership, if I'm right, you would set up for them to come here, right? You bring the furniture to
I'd
us.
still bring in pieces of furniture through the bidding process, it just wouldn't be the magnitude of
Right.
furniture.
What our partnership is, you would set up so the partner would bring stuff in for
Yeah.
the teachers to try.
And the students though, right? I mean, they could like literally demo something
Absolutely, yeah.
in a classroom setting.
And that would be
Test
something we
groups.
could always ask during that interview process with partners and see how
Yeah.
accessible they would be to that idea. Because some are more
Yeah, no,
inclined than others.
I just like giving, anytime we can give our students and teachers a voice, I just always think it's good.
Yeah, we're doing a project right now for cafeteria, and we've got a student committee identified that they're going to help us pick the different types of furniture in their cafeteria. So I agree. Anytime we can amplify the student voice and give them a decision. I think
Even
that's good.
if it's a visual rendering of the space and they're like yes or no, then at least that's a direction we can go from.
I think we have our next steps. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're gonna real quick skip 7-1 and go down to 7-2.
You got other stuff there
first. What?
You've got audience,
Oh, yeah,
you should
yeah.
get audience.
we're now on 6-4 communications. Lindsay, see anything? No audience comments, no communications. Board committee reports. Foundations, and then that's our meeting. Oh, we have a building committee meeting.
Talk about it.
Yep. Oh, what else? Another thing, that's really not a committee. That's about it. All right, now we're down to 7-2. Discuss, consider taking any necessary action in improving the curriculum for English 11. Oh, that's it. Joshua.
On September, let me get the dates here, right? September 11th, the Board Curriculum and American Committee on Curriculum and American Civics met to look at the final, 23 weeks of the proposed English 11 scope and sequence. After some, I'd say, rather cordial conversation, it was approved, it was recommended to me to bring the recommendation to the full board for approval. So that's where we stand.
Is that the one that was given to us at the last
It is.
meeting? Okay.
The same one, yes. So that would be my recommendation.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the remaining 23 weeks of the English 11 curriculum.
We did 13.
Yeah.
Correct.
Second.
Any discussion? Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brad,
Yep.
Bob,
Yeah.
The only, I will add one thing, because I think moving forward, I think we have a better, how we're gonna do it, so it's not, so there's more time in advance, so everybody can get, every board member can get what they need to see, instead of right before a meeting.
Yep, so like to give you an idea, math materials, that's something that, as standards come, my plan generally with changes like that would be an 18-month window. So we would look at a full year and a semester where we're talking through those things. There would be time to have the committee come in and, provide reports or updates on where we're at. Teacher surveys that they complete as we move through the process. So all of that type of stuff would be provided. Generally though, in I guess I would just call it like a singleton area where it's one person, then I could see more of an accelerated timeline, but nothing like what you just had to go through.
And for what it's worth, I read 2 of those books, and they do seem really engaging. I think that they will help get our kids excited about learning, which is the whole point.
I think it kind of was the eye of the storm where we got a new teacher. We moved books out of the junior curriculum in sophomore, senior, wherever they went. And then she tried to change some things around, so normally we'll have more lead time than that.
Yeah, on that note, I do just want to thank the board and all, but also the curriculum committee for, working through that process and asking good questions and helping us to get to where we are right now, so thank you.
Yeah. 7.1.
Okay. Action item for the resolution for the additional 6%. Pretty straightforward. Talked about it several times. The way that the resolution attached reads, and I'm not going to read it yet because I want to make sure we're all on the same page, but the way that it reads is 6%. We can adjust that, amend that, change that to read whatever percentage you want that to read, understanding that then I need to go back and rework the budget again as well. So this is 100% you guys' decision. I made my recommendation with the way the budget's put together, but just like spending of the money takes your authority, takes your vote. I can't just unilaterally go out and do it. The budget's the same thing. You guys have to make the vote on that. Did I put a typo in there?
It does read percentage up to 7%, in parentheses, it says 6%.
Should be 6%.
Maybe we can get that extra one in there.
I can get that changed. Yeah, I'm just working off a legal template. So within the state, depending on your student enrollment, the smaller schools can access 7%. Schools in our range can access 6%. Big schools get 5%. So we will read it in and it will be correct before it's signed.
This still is so confusing in that it sounds like 6 is the max as opposed to 6 plus 3.
Correct.
And so that is just, the 3 is written somewhere in the statutes that will trigger whoever reads this to understand that's 9%.
And again, you need roughly just 5.5, that includes the initial 3, so at least 5.5 to 6, just to get our budget for salaries, benefits, and all that for this year.
Correct.
And
3 of the additional
And the other
6.
2 will go to the general fund, which we therefore can, as a board, can decide where it's going to be earmarked.
The rest still goes into general fund,
Until,
and then determination can be made on transfer on what it's
Okay,
spent
so-
towards any of that. Board still has control of it.
okay, because my big thing is
Yeah.
we know what I know what one big need is, and if I know that that can be used for that, then we're doing it, it's used for a need,
Correct.
a true need for the district, not just our district, for both schools, for that track. So, okay, just want to get clarification.
Yeah, or any other immediate
That's
item
the-
too,
the big-
yeah. Yeah, no,
big
sure,
one.
I don't disagree with you.
Probably the last piece of this, just to consider before we do, it does require at least 5/6. It's not just a simple majority vote. Right?
I think with a track need and the volatility of state funding.
What do you see, Renee?
Do we have to approve the budget itself actually tonight? Do we ever have to? approve
Yes.
the budget?
Yes.
When is that?
So we have a special meeting scheduled
Yeah,
next week.
next week. That's
Thank you.
special.
That's what,
And that will, so
what night's that?
Monday. I get a little, with the postcard bill, I get a little hesitant to do the hearings and the budget approval on the same night.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As-
No, I agree.
So the budget and the tax asking is next Monday, 6 o'clock in the boardroom. Should be short.
And it's to our benefit because it allows people that tonight are sitting in a different one, where's it at?
Courthouse.
Courthouse. They're there, and so they wouldn't have an opportunity to come here. So this gives them an opportunity next Monday to come to this one if they have questions or concerns.
You said the meeting's in the boardroom, that's here, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's not a long.
So the impact then of saying, okay, we're gonna go with whatever percent increase this year, is that the way it typically works is that's where you start the next year, and then you go that 3% unless they 3% above that.
Correct.
In future years, so.
Yeah, it just sets your baseline for calculation of the 3% and any percent in excess of that that's allowed.
We still control it as a board.
Correct, the board has
And at the end of
complete
the day, we
control.
can turn back and say no, yeah, so we ultimately have the control, we're just saying tonight that this is what we're gonna do. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to increase that to 6%. Adopt the resolution to increase it to 6%. Up to.
Specific language is in the board item. If you read it word for word, we're good.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution to increase the school district's base growth percentage used to determine the school district's property tax authority up to 6%.
Discussion. Chris?
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
7.3, discuss, consider, and take any necessary action to adopt policy 6037 to the board policy manual.
Okay, you had three examples in front of you last month. I believe you narrowed in on 2 of them, but there wasn't a decision as to which direction we wanted to go. We do need to get this in the policy manual, probably sooner rather than later. You wanted 1 more month to read through, look at it, and make a decision tonight.
Well, I will just reiterate what I said last month, which is, as I look at this, version 3 seems to meet the concerns for review, appeal to the board with the least number of people who have to be involved each time. So from my perspective, the most efficient version is version 3.
Version 3 was the one that I think I prepared after the meeting 2 months ago.
Yes, immediately after, that was your first red line. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the third option, number 3.
Second.
Discussion. Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
All right. 7.4, discuss, consider, take any necessary action to approve MCL pay application number 5. Randy?
I'm gonna jump in before you guys say anything. My recommendation is to not approve that tonight. If you remember, I sent that pay app out to you guys on Wednesday with 0 oversight from BVH or Russ. I still don't have any feedback back from BVH or Russ. BVH is almost there. I talked to Andrew today. He still had to look at a couple things. I haven't heard from Russ. Initially, the timeline that I understood was it would go out to them the first week, come to us the second week to be approved the third week, and we fell a week behind. So that would be my recommendation to you guys.
So Brandon, could they bring it to us next, to Monday's meeting, or is that just for budget? Like, we can put on an action item? Because if they give it to us, I mean, or you just want to make, oh, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So then we even need to make a motion. Okay.
Table it.
Okay.
Brandon, I would, just from a kind of a committee perspective, just so everyone's aware, we did meet with MCL, asked for some further documentary evidence to support the burden rate that they're charging. I think they committed to provide a number of things that we simply still have not seen.
They did send some,
Yes, I think
but it's not, yes.
they clarified their Nebraska
Yeah.
unemployment rate, which was great. They sent some numbers, but didn't tell me what those numbers represented, or didn't tell us that. Didn't give us a list of the small tools, didn't give us
No.
any insurance invoices.
Percentage on
Right, so we have a long way to go, and I would think they should be able to pull it together quickly, but they just haven't.
Did you reply to him in that effect
I have
after the
not.
first one?
I have not.
that. I think I
Did you?
did talk to them.
I need to.
Because I just
Okay.
asked, I
Yeah.
don't understand some of the.
Those numbers, yeah, they're
They don't,
just,
they don't tell you, you know.
there's 3
But
numbers
I'm
on
gonna,
the
I'm gonna look
page.
and see, make sure I did send it. I know I was doing it that day, and sometimes I have a tendency to put in my drafts, I try to forget send.
Items for next meeting? Pay app 5.
So for the next regular meeting, we've got to do pay app 5. There should not be any policy. Do we have anything from you next month? I don't think we do we? October? Vernon will have early graduates.
If we have unembargoed data, either ACT or NSCAS or any of those things, I would have shared in October in the past that ACT data.
Potentially a report from committee as far as FF&E, how that's moved.
Oh, I was gonna ask, Dave, have you guys, as, what's her name? Academic, honor society, have you met? Okay,
That's probably going to be a conversation next month.
okay, good. Anything else?
Or motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Chris? Aye.
Aye. Aye. Captain.
Thank you for your patience. Josh,